They told us it was politics. They told us it was oil. But what if the real reason Israel and Iran are on the brink of war was written down thousands of years ago, not in a classified file but in the Bible, before the first missile was ever fired? Before diplomats shook hands or broke alliances, this confrontation may have already been foretold, etched into sacred prophecy waiting to ignite. In a world obsessed with breaking news and blame games, we rarely ask the deeper question: is this conflict just history repeating itself? Or is it destiny finally catching up? What if this isn't just another war, but the unraveling of an ancient script where nations play roles they didn't even realize they'd been cast in? If you've ever felt like something bigger is at play behind the headlines, something eerie, spiritual, and chillingly precise, you're not alone. Because according to the Bible, this isn't random, it's prophecy. Drop a 777 in the comments if you were ready to see what was written before any of this ever began. Stay with me. What you're about to discover may shake your faith or strengthen it forever. Israel versus Iran. How it will all end according to the Bible. To uncover the hidden roots of the unending conflict between Jews and Arabs, we must journey back, not just through history, but deep into the ancient sands of divine purpose. Picture it, a vast, barren wilderness where silence reigned and time seemed to pause. In the heart of this desolate land stood one man, Abraham, not a king, not a warrior, but a man chosen by God himself. It was here that Abraham received a promise so powerful it would ripple across generations and shape the destinies of nations. The voice of the Lord declared in Genesis 12:7, "To your offspring I will give this land." But who exactly were those offspring? Before the promised child Isaac ever took his first breath, Abraham fathered another son, Ishmael, through Hagar, his Egyptian servant. Can you imagine the tension in Abraham's heart? One son born of waiting and faith, the other of human decision and desperation. Ishmael was not rejected. He was cherished, seen by God. In fact, the Lord spoke clearly in Genesis 17:22-21. "As for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will surely bless him. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac." Do you see the divine split? Two sons, two beginnings, two lines of destiny that would one day collide like fire and oil. Ishmael would become the father of many great nations, his lineage branching into the vast Arab tribes, many of whom would later become the foundation of the Islamic world. Isaac, on the other hand, would give birth to Jacob, the man renamed Israel, from whom 12 tribes would rise to carry the sacred covenant of God into history. Now pause for a moment. If you were Abraham standing in the heat of the desert, watching both your sons grow, one in the light of the covenant, the other in the shadow of blessing, what would you feel? Could you foresee the future that was unfolding? This isn't just a story of family, it's a prophecy in motion. Have you ever wondered why the conflict between Israel and the Arab world feels so deeply personal, so unending, so spiritual at its core? It's because it didn't begin with politics. It began with a promise that still echoes in the bloodlines of nations today. What if your family carried a divine divide like this? Would you recognize the spiritual implications, or would you only see the surface? The battle you see on the news might just be the fulfillment of ancient words spoken under a desert sky, but this is only the beginning. Are you ready to hear what happened next? The third branch, Persia's ancient roots. Hidden beneath the centuries of struggle between Isaac and Ishmael's lines lies a third branch, one that history often whispers about, but rarely highlights. While the spotlight has long been on the sons of Abraham. What if the key to understanding today's global tensions requires us to look even further back to the days right after the flood, where Noah's sons stepped out into a cleansed and silent world? Among Noah's 3 sons, it was Japheth who fathered a lineage that would reach far across the continents. Genesis 10:2 lists his sons, and among them was Modai. Who was Modai? His name appears only briefly, but his descendants would merge with one of the most formidable forces the ancient world had ever seen, the Persians. Can you sense the quiet unfolding of destiny? From Japheth came the Medes, and when they joined forces with the Persians, they birthed the Medo-Persian Empire. a mighty kingdom of iron and silver, one that would rise to crush Babylon and etch its name into the very structure of biblical prophecy. And today, we know this land by another name, Iran. Have you ever considered that Iran's roots stretch all the way back to the sons of Noah? That modern geopolitical tensions might actually be echoes of ancient bloodlines and divine orchestration? While the world sees a nation with nuclear ambitions and regional influence, the Bible sees something far older, a people foretold. If you stood at the edge of time with Noah, watching his sons walk in different directions, could you imagine that their children would one day represent forces that shape global history? What if the conflict between Israel and Iran is more than politics or power? What if it's the unfolding of a prophetic script written thousands of years ago? 3 lines, 3 legacies, 3 forces now converging in the heart of the Middle East. And the story is only gaining momentum. Are you beginning to see the bigger picture? Or is something even deeper waiting to be revealed? The stage is set. Israel, Arabs, and Persia, and so the ancient stage was set. Though most of the world never realized they were watching prophecy unfold in plain sight. On one side stood Israel, born through Isaac, the promised son, carrying the sacred covenant passed down from Abraham. This was the nation chosen to walk closely with God, to carry his laws, and to be a light among the nations. But Israel would not be alone in this divine drama. Across the desert and mountains, the sons of Ishmael rose, fierce, numerous, and blessed in their own right. These descendants of Abraham through Hagar became the fathers of many Arab tribes, people of strength and spirit, whose presence would shape the religious and political soul of the Middle East. Though the covenant did not pass through Ishmael, God's promise to bless him remained unshaken. Could this be why the tension has never just been about land, but about legacy? And then, from a third direction, seemingly distant, yet prophetically significant, came the descendants of Japheth through Madai, who merged with the rising power of Persia. From this union emerged an empire so vast and powerful, it would one day challenge Babylon itself. That empire, the Medo-Persian Colossus, still casts its long shadow through what we now call Iran. Did you ever imagine that Iran's origin could be traced back to Noah's own bloodline? 3 branches, 3 ancient names: Israel, Persia, the Arab nations, each bound not just by history, but by heaven. Each carrying a piece of a divine puzzle that spans continents and centuries. Are you starting to sense the invisible hand weaving through it all? If you were a celestial observer watching from the heavens as these 3 lines emerged from deserts, mountains, and plains, would you begin to wonder what great plan they were being drawn into? Could you feel the weight of prophecy in their footsteps? This was no accident of geography, no coincidence of culture. It was orchestration. It was alignment. It was preparation. The question now is, what were they being prepared for? And why are their paths colliding again in our lifetime? Persia's shifting role, mercy and malice. But Persia's role in biblical history wasn't always one of opposition, a twist that would leave many speechless even today. The very empire that now challenges Israel was once used by God as a vessel of mercy and restoration. Yes, Persia, the same land whose modern name is Iran, once held a sacred place in the unfolding of God's redemptive plan. Picture the devastation of Jerusalem in 586 BC. The temple, once filled with the glory of God, lay in ruins. The streets of Zion were silent, and her people had been dragged into exile by the Babylonians. For the Jewish people, it must have felt like the end of everything they believed in. Can you imagine being torn from your home, watching the place of God's presence reduced to rubble? Could hope survive such loss? But there was a promise, one spoken long before the destruction came. The prophet Jeremiah, carrying the heavy burden of warning and comfort, had declared, "When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my good promise to bring you back to this place." A promise that seemed impossible until God reached into history and stirred a heart no one expected. Enter Cyrus the Great, a pagan king, a ruler with no covenant, no Torah, no priesthood. And yet 150 years before he was even born, the prophet Isaiah wrote his name. This is what the Lord says to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I take hold of, to subdue nations before him. Let that sink in. God called a Persian king his anointed. Have you ever wondered what it means for a man outside of Israel to be called God as anointed? What kind of authority must rest on a person when the Lord himself claims to guide their right hand? Cyrus would go on to overthrow Babylon. And rather than enslaving the Jews, he did the unthinkable. He released them. He issued a decree recorded in the opening chapters of Ezra, permitting the Jews to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. Imagine the sound of hammers ringing again on sacred stone, the laughter of exiles returning home, the fulfillment of prophecy in real time. Persia, the outsider, became an instrument of divine restoration. Through Cyrus, God revealed a profound truth. He is not bound by borders or bloodlines. He can use anyone, even a foreign king, to fulfill his holy purposes. If he could use Persia for good once, could he do it again? Or has something changed? What does this tell us about how God moves? And if he used someone like Cyrus, then is it possible he is raising up unexpected figures even now? Figures the world least expects to shift the balance of history. Again, the story of Israel and Persia is not just about enmity. It's about the mysterious ways of a sovereign God who writes names into prophecy before their owners take their first breath. Are you beginning to see how deep the connections go? And could the ancient cycle be repeating this time in front of our very eyes? The shadow of Haman and the rise of modern Iran? But Persia's role in this divine drama didn't conclude with the mercy of Cyrus. No. The story took a darker turn, one that still sends a chill down the spine of history. Years after the temple was rebuilt and the exiles had returned, the Persian Empire once again became the backdrop for a cosmic confrontation. This time the enemy was not outside the palace walls but within them. Under the reign of King Xerxes, also known in the Bible as Ahasuerus, a high-ranking official named Haman rose to power. His hatred was cold, calculated, and total. Hidden behind royal robes and courtly titles was a man consumed with a single terrifying ambition: to wipe out every Jew across the empire. Have you ever considered how close the chosen people came to total annihilation? What if the entire future of Israel hung on the courage of one hidden figure? But God was already 10 steps ahead. Unknown to Haman, a young Jewish woman named Esther had been positioned inside the palace, an orphan raised by her cousin Mordecai, now crowned queen in a foreign land. Esther may have looked like royalty, but inside she carried the destiny of her people.
Ow.
And when the hour of decision came, she faced the ultimate test. Remain silent and safe, or speak up and risk everything. Mordecai's words in Esther 4:14 still resound across centuries. Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? Have you ever wondered if your own position, your job, your influence, your platform was divinely appointed for a purpose greater than yourself? Esther chose to act. She exposed Haman's plot before the king, and her bravery turned the tide. The Jews were saved, the enemy was defeated, and once again, Persia became the unlikely battleground of deliverance. But beneath the miracle, a darker truth lingered, one that never truly left. A spiritual tension had begun to take root. What had once been a land of restoration under Cyrus had now birthed a plot of extermination under Haman. The same soil that once carried freedom now carried a seed of destruction. And that seed, it did not die. Isn't it strange how history can shift with the rise of one heart, whether for good or evil? And what if the spirit that once moved through Haman never really vanished, but waited in silence looking for its moment to return? Centuries passed, but the shadow remained. Persia would rise again, not with scrolls of liberation, but with words that echoed ancient hatred, not with decrees of return, but with cries of annihilation. Could it be that the past is speaking to the present? And if so, are we listening? The story isn't finished. In fact, it may just be beginning again. Do you see it? Or are you still looking at Persia as merely a place on the map? The Islamic Revolution and the spiritual war in 1979, history took a chilling turn. The ancient land once known as Persia, the empire that once freed the Jews under Cyrus and later threatened them under Haman, was reborn with a new face. This time, not as a monarchy, but as a theocracy. The Islamic Revolution swept across Iran like a storm, toppling the Shah and raising a new banner over the nation, one not merely political, but deeply spiritual. A regime rooted in Shiite Islam emerged, carrying not only national ambitions, but an apocalyptic vision. From its earliest proclamations, the new Iran declared an unshakable mission: the destruction of Israel. Can you imagine a modern government whose founding documents are infused with ancient hatred? Iran's leaders began to call Israel the Little Satan, a title soaked in contempt and religious symbolism. Their vow: to erase her from existence, to cleanse the land of the people once promised by God Himself. And this wasn't just empty rhetoric. Iran's support of proxy groups like Hezbollah and Hamas transformed words into weapons. Through funding, training, and arms, Iran has fueled fires of terror across the Middle East. These groups do not merely oppose Israel. They exist in part to fulfill Iran's unspoken prophecy: to strike at the covenant people through the shadows. Their very constitution denies Israel's right to exist, not negotiate, not coexist, but to exist. But beneath the military strategies and political speeches, can you feel it? There's something darker, something ancient at work. What kind of power compels a nation to craft its identity around another nation's destruction? Is it just politics, or is it prophecy resurfacing? What if the spirit that whispered to Haman now echoes through modern microphones and missile blueprints? What if this isn't just a regional feud, but a spiritual war stretching back to the desert cries of Ishmael, the promises to Isaac, and the rising voice of Japheth's sons? If you lived in Israel today, knowing that your enemies are not just at your borders, but in the pages of ancient prophecy, how would you pray? How would you prepare? Iran's transformation in 1979 wasn't just a change of power. It was a shift in spiritual atmosphere. And while the world sees political conflict, those with eyes to see might discern something deeper. The stage is being set again. The same soil that once held deliverance and destruction now trembles with prophetic tension. Can you sense it? The ancient players have returned to the stage, and the final act may be closer than we think. The Prince of Persia and the invisible war, hidden deep within the pages of Daniel, lies a revelation so profound most overlook it entirely. In chapter 10, we find the prophet in a moment of intense spiritual desperation. For 21 days, Daniel fasted no bread, no wine, no meat, seeking understanding from God. But heaven seemed silent. Why the delay? Had his prayers gone unheard? Then suddenly an angel appeared, radiant and breathless with urgency. And what he said shattered the boundary between the physical and the spiritual. The prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. Wait, what prince? Daniel lived in exile under the Persian Empire, but this was no earthly ruler. This was a spiritual principality, a dark force assigned to Persia, powerful enough to delay a heavenly messenger. Can you grasp the weight of that? Behind Persia, there was a demonic intelligence, a territorial spirit influencing the direction of kings and kingdoms. And if such a being ruled, then who or what rules behind modern-day Iran? Ephesians 6:12 removes the veil completely. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world. The real war, then, is not in parliaments or on battlefields. It is waged in the invisible realm where ancient spirits whisper into the hearts of leaders, where darkness manipulates policy, where hatred is inflamed, not by strategy, but by spirits. Could it be that the same prince who resisted the angel in Daniel's day still stalks the land today? Has the principality behind Persia ever truly been cast down? Or has it merely changed its mask? Iran's hatred of Israel is not simply rooted in ideology or history. It is spiritual. It is ancient. it is prophetic. When Iran declares its desire to wipe Israel from the map, it is echoing a voice that first spoke behind the thrones of kings long dead. If you stood beside Daniel during those 21 days, feeling the weight of the silence, would you have imagined a war raging above your head? What if your prayers today are contending with the same darkness? This is not just about nations, it's about realms. It's about prophecy. It's about a kingdom of darkness that has opposed the covenant people from the beginning. Now that battle is coming to a boiling point. Are we paying attention, or have we been distracted by the surface? While the real war is being fought just beyond our sight, Ezekiel 38, the prophetic storm cloud. Ezekiel 38 opens like a prophetic storm cloud rolling in from the edges of time, dark, foreboding, and undeniable. In this ancient chapter written thousands of years ago, the prophet describes a terrifying vision, a vast coalition of nations rising in unison against one small sacred land. And at the heart of this alliance, standing boldly among the aggressors, is none other than Persia, modern-day Iran. Persia, Cush, and Put will be with them. The names may sound ancient, but their modern echoes are unmistakable. But Persia is not alone. Marching beside her are nations from the south, regions known today as North Africa. And from the far north, a strange and powerful figure emerges. Gog, from the land of Magog. Who is this Gog? His identity has stirred debate for generations. Some scholars trace him to the areas near modern-day Russia or the steppes of Central Asia. Others see him as a broader representation, symbolic leader of a global anti-Israel alliance. Can you imagine such a coalition forming today? A confederacy that includes Iran, North African powers, and northern giants, uniting not for peace, but with a singular, deadly objective: to wipe Israel off the map? What would compel such diverse nations, different in culture, language, and politics, to come together in violent unity? Could the answer be found not in diplomacy, but in destiny? Ezekiel's vision isn't vague or poetic. It's chillingly specific. A massive, organized force advancing toward Israel in the last days. The purpose, total destruction, the motive, opposition to God's covenant. If you were living in Israel today, watching alliances tighten and hostilities grow, would you feel the shadow of Ezekiel's words creeping closer? Could we be standing at the threshold of the very prophecy spoken over 2,500 years ago? And here's what's most unsettling. This isn't just a geopolitical scenario. It's a spiritual convergence. Persia, once a tool of God's mercy, now reemerges as a leading threat in an end-times war. Gog, shrouded in mystery, prepares to move. The stage is not just being set. The actors are stepping into place. Have you ever felt that history was repeating itself, but this time on a scale so vast that only prophecy could have predicted it? The message of Ezekiel is not a riddle. It's a warning, a revelation, a glimpse into the final confrontation between the forces of darkness and the people of promise. And as the alliances grow stronger and the rhetoric more violent, we are left with a sobering question. Are we watching the beginnings of Ezekiel 38 unfold before our eyes? Divine intervention. God's response to the storm, yet, even as the storm gathers, God is not silent. The prophecy in Ezekiel 38 does not end with the rise of dark alliances or the threat of annihilation. It crescendos with the voice of divine fury. The same God who watches over Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. And when the armies of the earth dare to march against his covenant people, he responds not with whispers, but with wonders. Listen to the thunderous declaration of Ezekiel 38 to 18:23. I will execute judgment with plague and bloodshed. I will pour down torrents of rain, hailstones, and burning sulfur on him, and on his troops, and on the many nations with him. Then they will know that I am the Lord. Can you feel the weight of that? This isn't just another battle. It's not political warfare or a clash of civilizations. This is divine intervention, judgment poured out from the throne of heaven itself. Hailstones, fire, plague, a storm so fierce that the entire world will pause and know This was not man's doing. This was God defending his promise. So what are we witnessing today? Iran's defiance grows louder. Its aggression, once regional, now reaches across borders. It funds terror. It fuels hatred. It seeks nuclear power with thinly veiled intentions. The words of its leaders echo with the venom of ancient enemies. Can you hear them? Can you see how the shadows of Persia's past are stepping once again into the light? Are these the pieces of the Ezekiel puzzle sliding into place? Could the coalition prophesied long ago be slowly forming behind closed doors? Diplomatic smiles masking darker designs? If you've ever doubted prophecy, now might be the time to look again. What are the odds that the very nations named by Ezekiel Persia Put, Cush, Magog, all growing more vocal, more aligned, more prepared? Imagine standing in the middle of a battlefield where missiles rain from the sky, but then something shifts. Fire not launched by human hands, hail not born of nature. Could you recognize the difference between a war of men and the wrath of God? This is not just a story of enemies, it's a story of covenant, of a God who has promised and who will not break that promise. And when the world rises to challenge that covenant, the Lord himself steps into the fray. So the question is no longer if God will act. The question is, how close are we to seeing it unfold with our own eyes? Will you be ready to recognize his hand when it moves? Or will you be among those left in awe, saying, "Surely this was the Lord"?
The final act. Zechariah 14 and the king's return. The prophecy grows sharper now. It's no longer shadowed in mystery, but radiant with divine certainty. Zechariah 14 lifts the veil on the final act. The nations will gather against Jerusalem, the prophet declares. But just when the darkness seems absolute, when the armies of the earth encircle the holy city, something beyond comprehension happens. Then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations. On that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives. Can you feel the trembling of the earth in those words? The very mountain where Jesus once wept, prayed, and ascended into heaven. Acts 1:9-12 tells us it was from the Mount of Olives that he rose in glory. It is the very place where he will return. This isn't speculation. This is divine precision. The first descent and the final descent in the exact same place. And when he returns, it won't be to hold peace talks or offer diplomatic solutions. There will be no round tables, no treaties, no negotiations. When his feet touch that sacred mountain, it will be the signal that the war is over. Not by surrender, but by sovereign victory, because he's not coming back as a suffering servant. He's coming back as a reigning king. Revelation 19:11-16 captures the moment with holy fire. Heaven opened, and there before me was a white horse whose rider is called Faithful and True. With justice he judges and makes war. On his robe and on his thigh he has this name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Can you picture it? The sky itself torn open, a white horse riding forth. The king, not in silence but in splendor, leading heaven's armies to finish what was written long ago. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to see the sky crack open? To witness with your own eyes the one who was and is to come? Riding into the final battle, not as a concept of hope, but as a force of glory. All the powers that once conspired against Israel, Persia, Magog, Gog, the nations of the earth will stand helpless before the blazing eyes of the returning king. The war that began in the ancient sands with Isaac and Ishmael, that surged through Persia and echoed in Iran, that rose in Ezekiel and burned in Revelation, will end on the Mount of Olives, and it won't end in destruction. It will end in dominion, in glory, in the reign of the King, whose name no man dares to speak in vain. Are we watching the signs unfold now? Are we nearing the moment when heaven opens and prophecy becomes reality before our very eyes? Because when he comes, every knee will bow, every eye will see. And no force on earth or under it will stand against the one whose robe is dipped in blood and whose name is victory. Your role, watchman, warrior, witness. Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The question echoed in Psalm 2 cuts through the noise of headlines, nuclear threats, and political turmoil. And in that very psalm, God gives his answer, not with panic, but with power. The one enthroned in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. I have installed my king on Zion, my holy mountain. Do you see it? The world may tremble, but heaven does not. The nations rage. Iran rises with boldness. Alliances grow darker. Prophecies converge in plain sight. Yet through it all, the throne of God remains utterly unmoved. Not one plan of man or demon will overthrow what has already been decreed. And so we stand at a crossroads, not of prophecy, for the word is already written, but of response. What will you do as the hour unfolds? Now is not the time for the church to grow quiet. Now is not the time for God's chosen ones to sit on the sidelines. Psalm 122-6 is not a suggestion. It is a call from the heart of heaven. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. This is not merely a prayer for calm streets. It is an act of prophetic alignment. A declaration that we choose to stand with God's purposes, with His people, and with His plan. Can you feel the weight of this moment? It is not about fear. It is about preparation. It is about watching the signs and understanding the hour. Not as frightened spectators, but as faithful watchmen. The war may be written. Yes, the kingdoms may clash, but your part in this story is still being written. Will you choose to align with the King? Will you be among those who discern the season and rise in bold intercession, unshaken in faith? Because the King is not delaying, He is preparing. And the final trumpet will not sound for the terrified, it will sound for the ready. So, as the nations rage, as Iran rattles its sword, as ancient spirits stir again, lift your eyes higher. Heaven is not worried. Heaven is waiting. And when the King returns, may He find you not in fear, but in faith, watching, praying, discerning, and ready. The war is real, but so is the kingdom that cannot be shaken. The pages of Scripture have been whispering this story for thousands of years. From the deserts of Abraham's journey, to the rise of ancient Persia, to the prophecy of Ezekiel and the thunder of Revelation, every detail, every name, every nation has been leading to this divine intersection between heaven's plan and man's rebellion. And now we are watching it unfold. The conflict between Iran and Israel is not just geopolitical. It is spiritual. It is ancient. It is prophetic. Iran's threats are not isolated shouts in the dark. They are echoes of a war that began long ago when covenant and opposition first collided. What we see today in the news, the rising tensions, the missile strikes, the alliances forming in silences, not just about borders, it is about the throne, it is about the King. But through all the chaos, one truth remains unshaken. God reigns. Now, the one who installed His King on Zion is not pacing in worry. He is seated in authority. But that King, faithful and true, is coming back, not to negotiate, but to reign. What do we take from this? What do we carry into our hearts as we see prophecy walking toward us in real time? You are not powerless in this war. As part of the body of Christ, your prayers matter. Your voice matters. Your discernment matters. Psalm 122-6 wasn't given for times of comfort. It was commanded for times like this. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. When you pray, you align yourself with heaven's decree. You stand in the gap. You prepare the way for the return of the King. Let this moment stir something in you. Let it awaken your spirit. Don't just be a spectator. Be a watchman. Be a warrior in prayer. Be a voice crying out for truth, for justice, for mercy. Be someone who says, I see the signs. I hear the call, and I choose to stand. Because though the war may be written, your response is still unfolding, and heaven is watching. If this message stirred something in you, don't let it end here. Comment below with, I stand with the King. Let your voice be heard. Pray for Jerusalem. Intercede for the nations. Stay ready for His return. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to see the bigger picture. And subscribe for more prophetic insight rooted in Scripture. And if you feel led to support this message, you can do so through a super thanks below. Every gift goes towards spreading the truth in these urgent times. Whether you give or not, may God bless you abundantly for walking in discernment and faith. The battle is real, but so is the victory, and the King is on His way.